Cool. We're on. Welcome to the Athletes Health Podcast here, talking to athletes, coaches, leaders, anyone we can really learn some tricks, tips from, I like to call them, some tools to add to the tool belt for their mental game. And this is a slightly different avenue of it, but it's honestly one of these avenues that I really love to pursue. And I've been doing some of these other things, like one of these big topics we're going to talk about today is the cupping. And I've honestly been doing it at home stuff. And I found your book, the cupping book. So I have Dr. Tom and Jed. Yeah, I butchered it. So
Ingegno, man, you're
Ingegno.
fine.
Okay,
Don't
it's
worry.
all
Like I
good.
said, no one gets it right.
But I we came across each other. I had your book. I read it and I was just even more interested. But I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself briefly so people had a little rundown, and then we'll just kind of start talking about some of
Yeah,
these
yeah.
other
So
topics.
I've been practicing Chinese medicine and acupuncture, or should I say East Asian medicine, because I actually do a Japanese style of acupuncture for over 23 years now. I mean, we're coming up on 24 pretty soon. And I've always been passionate about empowering people to be able to help themselves at home. I think, what you do in any clinic, or what you do, when you go and get a checkup is really just a snapshot. It's the same thing with, like, school, right? The kids are in there how many months, 8 hours a day or something, but there's all this time outside of school. And you can turn that into something where you're learning and expanding and getting better and, helping yourself, or you can just put it all onto the dude in the white lab coat, and hopefully you don't turn out a statistic later on. So anything we can do that really, uh, helps us live longer, healthier, happier lives, um, especially when it's low risk, especially when it's cost effective, I'm super excited about. And a lot of those things fall into this realm of traditional therapies. So they're things that were traditionally done at home before you even went to see a doctor. And I'd love to return those things to people's hands. And that's really where, certainly you shouldn't be doing acupuncture at home, but cupping therapy was traditionally a home practice before practitioners would do it in clinics, and, whatever the older doctors were in ancient Egypt and things like that. But you definitely have this root therapy that spread around the world and was used in households for thousands of years. And why not make that known to modern day practitioners, and give that back to them?
See, hearing you say that, like you want to empower the people and help them out so they don't always need to have the doctors, and just with your whole philosophy is really intriguing. And that's what I really love to hear, because know some people around my area here in Iowa, because you're in Maryland, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I remember that
Baltimore.
right? I know some people around here who do have those same philosophies, and it just seems so much holistic, I like to say. Because I mean, I've been with the white lab coats and in the hospitals for an extended amount of time. So, like,
Hmm.
I've seen that side, but I've also seen this side that you're talking about in the cupping. I had a cupping set, like, I've had one for like 5 years. And that's why I said, like, if I had your book, the book I read briefly of all the at-home remedies to use with it, I think I would have used it so much more effectively.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm
And
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, man. It fits that, like, this does not need to be a PhD level study in something, right? One of the things that I loved about it was always called grandma's medicine. So when I wrote the book, it wasn't meant to be like, I don't want to give you a 500-page textbook that you're going to be going like, all right, now I got to look that up, or now no, what would grandma have taught you?
Mhm.
So you can be effective and do this at home to yourself or your friends or your family, and then pass that knowledge on, right? I mean, that's really the goal, is to, it sounds so weird, you write a book and then you're like, no, I want people to be using this and take care of themselves, and then they don't need me, right? I'm like making myself obsolete, hopefully. But with a low cost to entry, the book isn't too expensive, and cups, God, you go on Amazon and you can have, your pick of like color, style, number, and you might be in a total of $50. And then you have a set and you have a knowledge that like lasts your whole life. and you're able to help yourself and help others. And God, that adds so much value to your own personal life and those around you.
And it feels good too. I mean, doing it. But
Yeah, yeah.
before we go more into the cupping and everything, I
Yeah.
wanted to just understand how you got into what you're doing and even just your credential of the doctor of acupuncture and
Yeah.
Chinese medicine. Because, like, at Iowa State that I just graduated with, there's not like anything of that program there.
Yeah, so even like, so Iowa State's a big school. Most East Asian medicine schools, they're real tiny, right? It's niche. This is another avenue that I'm really trying to expand, is awareness of this, right? So we're starting to see this return of like, well, what are these natural medicines? People want to take care of themselves, especially after COVID, right? And I'm not going to get into a debate about like, how we handled it and what was right and what was wrong. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I try to be as open with everything and understanding as much as possible. But certainly, you can't yell, oh, if we only did this years before, this would never have been a pandemic, right? It's like, well, yes, if we took better care of our health all along, it, things would have been infinitely better for us as a country, and across the planet. But we didn't, and hopefully we'll learn from that. But ever since then, there seems to be a real understanding that, like, at the end of the day, I could have the best team of healthcare practitioners. I could be going to the gym regularly. I could be working out. But unless I'm really owning and taking some control of my own personal health, no one's really 100% behind me. No one's really pushing me forward. I have to be the driving force in my own health decisions, in how I want to live my life. And yes, you're part of a community and you have to do things that the community says, and or you get kicked out. But within that, there's so much ability to add to your overall health. And I think even in my clinic post COVID, we doubled the amount of people that were coming in a month. And it was really this idea that people understood that, like, I gotta invest in my health so I can stay healthy, so I can manage my stress, so I can live the life I want to, right? And even the term self-care, I think, is a little misleading. It's like, well, of course you have to do that. Why? Because, like, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to get sick, you're going to get hurt, you're not going to be able to do those things that you want to do, right? And that's mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, however you want to word it. You have to look at all those buckets, right? You have to put something in all of them to make sure that you're, one, a balanced human being, and that you're, like, able to function. So for me, East Asian medicine hits all of those marks. I was pre-med undergrad,
Okay.
and through a weird Chinese philosophy course, a book I read on Taoism, a Tai Chi elective, and then just a bunch of stuff that, like, I had no control over. Right? I didn't sign up for the mailing list where an acupuncture school sent a postcard to my house. Just kind of
Mhm.
ended up there, and it was like, oh, what's this? I'll go to that open house. And then I came home with the paperwork. I signed up and enrolled, and was up and ready to go within a couple of weeks. It kind of chose me, and I just kind of listened to it, and it made so much sense. Where Western medicine is absolutely amazing at cutting stuff out and killing things, right? And we need that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
on the outside of that, what do we do? Oh, we're going to mask the symptom, right? I don't have anything to help fix your back. If you don't want surgery, let's give you painkillers. Well, now we have an opioid crisis. So if we look at traditional medicines, and acupuncture excels at pain management, right? And that's not even its best function, right? That's just something we can do. So it was really exciting to be able to enter healthcare in a way where you have this meaningful relationship with the patient, right? I'm there, you're in my room for an hour. And when we start, that might be twice a week, it might be once a week, but we get to know you pretty well. and we're asking questions beyond like, oh, so how'd you hurt your shoulder? Well, how are you sleeping? How's your digestion? Are you physically active? How's your bowel and bladder function? Right, for women, what, like, let's talk about your cycle. um and it should be pretty thorough. And what we should see through those treatments is not just an improvement of that shoulder, if that's what brought you in, but hey, I'm sleeping better. Oh, you know what? I noticed I'm not getting so pissed off when I'm in the car and I'm driving to work. Oh, wow. Those are all huge improvements that, once again, make you as a whole person healthier and more balanced. So it just became, you don't go into this acupuncture, right? Some of us are making good money, but that's not the drive. The drive is really to help humanity out. And if you're committed to that, you do okay, and patients really love you. I mean, I've been in Baltimore for 19 years now, and I think I have about a half dozen patients that I've been seeing for at least 15 years. Right? So not everyone stays on
Yeah,
forever. And then
yeah.
some people I see, hey, I hurt myself again. Okay, come on back. But that sense of community and that sense of look, it doesn't matter what you look like, who you pray to, what your beliefs are. This medicine is medicine for the people, and as long as you're a person, we can help you out. I'm sorry, I'm a little on my soapbox this morning, but
No, I mean, it's almost needed, isn't it? Because
yeah,
the part that stood out was when you were saying it's really the holistic approach when people come in for
yeah,
X symptom, but then they have Y, Z, W, just
yeah,
everything
yeah,
else is starting to be helped with it. Because I was just thinking about my own scenarios of where there's certain things within my health that I need like the Western care for, just because
yeah,
I needed it for like my heart and stuff. But
yeah.
then there's so much of the other pieces that the holistic thing that you're talking about and what you're doing helps out. And one thing that you said that I was wondering about is, and partly for like the audience that sometimes listen to this, or like how I work with a lot of like high school and younger athletes. But I added two caveat here of the population. You said how it's doubled. What is this population that you're working with? Because then
Yeah.
I do have some other people who listen who are like my age and then friends and family that are older too. So the population can range. But I was curious to
Yeah,
see what
yeah.
you think.
Like our biggest demographic in the clinic, it is that I want to say like 28 to 50-year-old person, both male and women, female, but like mostly like women tend to take better care of themselves. So we do skew a little bit more female. But before COVID, it was more of the people that were a little bit more savvy, right? They might have either the professional career path, or they were for lack of a better term, they were hippies. They were a little bit more out there.
Yeah.
Um, Post COVID, it seems like we're getting people from all walks of life. They're seeing the results, they're hearing about it more, they're understanding that this isn't just some old weird practice, but it has, god, more systematic reviews in the Cochrane database than physical therapy and chiropractic put together. I'm not knocking
Does it?
PT or chiropractic. I'm saying, like, look, this has been heavily researched, and it's been researched for thousands of years before we even had something we called the scientific method. So now, like, originally when those first studies came out, it was like, well, this is all BS. We got to prove it wrong. And then they're like, no, it's actually doing it. And then it became, how is it doing it, right? So we can describe acupuncture in Western concepts now that don't negate the traditional theories, but they inform them differently so the Western audience can understand them better. And
So
that's pretty cool. Go ahead.
I looked into this just the slightest bit because,
Yeah.
but I didn't look into it too much. So you're saying there is growing research, uh, for
Yeah.
like this Eastern medicine in the Western civilized or the new scientific
Yeah, yeah,
study
yeah.
research, right?
And it's always funny to me where they're like, "There's no research," and you're like, "Do you even go on PubMed, man?"
Yeah.
So, and when I mention systematic reviews specifically, that's like clusters of studies looking at
Yeah.
one specific avenue of this, right? So, and the reason we look at systematic reviews is because, you want to make sure that that data is replicated, right? Oh, this study is saying what that study first showed. And then two, systematic reviews also say these studies were good, these studies were average, this one was a little weak. And they take all that into consideration. And when you read those, it's not just one study, one methodology, but it kind of breaks down all that research on one particular avenue. So something like, say, acupuncture and IBS or something, right? You want to see a bunch of studies in one nice, concise, well, maybe not so concise, they're pretty long, but examination of that. Here's all the research we have on this, and here's what it's kind of telling us. And one thing, when we talk about acupuncture classically, we talk about chi and channels and meridians, and we say when there's disharmony in the body, when there's disease, when there's something going wrong, that energy isn't enough. It isn't flowing through those channels the right way. And when we put the acupuncture needles in, we're trying to build that or correct that or break it up if it's stuck. And it was such an eloquent way of describing all of these changes that happen during acupuncture. And now, this, what I'm going to talk about now, is this basic research where we say we do the acupuncture and this is what we see happen to the body. So I'm not
So,
going to. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
well, this is leading perfectly into one of the things I really want to talk about because
Yeah.
I have never done acupuncture and I really
Oh,
want to.
okay.
I know people like I know a lot of college athletes because
Yeah.
I'm in that space and they sometimes do it and they're like, dude, it hurts so bad, but then it feels so good after. I'm
All
like,
right.
I'll
So
have to
what I'm
do
going to
it.
say is, if it hurts so bad, they've got bad practitioners, and I'll throw hands over
Okay.
that one.
No, so let me finish my thought here
Go
too.
go ahead.
But and I'm glad you say that because, but the whole point of me saying that was just like, I really want to do it. I just
Yeah.
haven't. I've done the cupping for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I was really interested to hear you just kind of explain, walk through how it works and everything. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you're just leading right into that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
let's keep it
So
going.
so Western research shows, and there's a localized effect that in Japan they'll call an artificial splinter. So we know that, like anything that breaks the surface of our skin, whether it's a chunk of wood, a scalpel, an acupuncture needle, or like, broken glass, anything, we'll start sending blood to that area. That's how our body repairs itself, right? In
Hmm.
in that blood, we have white blood cells, we have antibodies, we have the proteins, we have clotting factors, so we can stop the bleeding. Um, but when we put this needle in and it's so small and there's nothing on it, right? It's sterile. The body still sends blood there and then goes, well, there isn't really any tissue damage. But while we're here, we're just going to flood the area with fresh blood. And what that does on one hand is all those blood vessels have to open up. So any metabolic waste, any inflammatory markers like cytokines or even lactic acid, if it's really close to post workout, um, kind of gets flushed out of that tissue, and then you have this fresh blood with oxygen, nutrients, antibodies, all of those things coming in right behind it to bathe it. So that's part of the way that we can help with like infection and inflammation and pain. Um, One of the greatest effects of acupuncture happens after about 10 to 15 minutes, which is we switch you out of fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system mode, and put you into parasympathetic nervous system mode, right? This is our rest and digest, as we call it colloquially, right? So this is when all our blood vessels open up. This is when we're getting more blood flow to our lungs, more blood flow to our gut. So we're picking up more oxygen, more nutrients, and then we're circulating that around the body more. So that's going to help heal all sorts of tissue, whether or not you're there for that specific thing, right? We're going to see better digestion, better respiratory rates, lower heart rates because everything's opened up, right? The blood's flowing smoother. And that's really where we get this great overall healing potential, right? And that's also going to the endocrine system, right? So now our hormones are going to be more optimized because we're getting fresh blood to nourish those glands. We know our neurotransmitters normalize, right? So serotonin, dopamine, when we see this weird balance, we get anxiety, depression. We stimulate oxytocin, which is a bonding, feel-good chemical. We know that endorphins are stimulated there, and endorphins are internally made morphine. The compound looks just like morphine, but it's
Hmm.
not addictive. It's part of what our brain does. And then in the 90s, we learned about this whole new system called the endocannabinoid system, right? So cannabinoids from cannabis, right? Same thing, bond to two different sites. We have CB1 and CB2. CB1 is attached to the nervous system. CB2 is more for immune therapy. But we know when we get acupuncture, we pump out this one endocannabinoid that's called anandamide. Ananda is Sanskrit for bliss, so we call this the bliss molecule. So when people get acupuncture and they leave, they feel a little floaty, a little stoned. And that's the anandamide and the endorphins kind of like doing their part, you know. Everyone can drive home, you're fine, you're not high, but it is an interesting side effect that helps you just feel better. You know, you're calm, you're relaxed, you're a little floaty.
And with that said, when they come in,
Yeah.
two pieces here. One of the it's not autonomic. Why? It's not parasympathetic nervous system. What's the other one?
The sympathetic.
I should know that.
That's
Wow.
okay, man. That's all
No,
right.
I should know that. But anyway, so they're coming in and they are a little more tensed up, or just
Yeah.
already before
I
they
mean
even come.
that's modern life, you know, and
And
no one's not. Yeah.
the question I was going to ask, as for the nervous system piece of the sympathetic nervous system, when they're kind of going, when the needle originally gets inserted, does
Yeah.
that spike it up a little bit more and
So
then they relax,
look,
or
if
no?
the practitioner's heavy-handed, and part of the reason I do a Japanese style, and I'm not calling out Chinese systems, I learned traditional Chinese medicine first, and then started doing a specific system called Japanese meridian therapy. Um, y- you know, inserting the needle is an art, right? So I can show you how to put a needle in about 2 or 3 minutes. To get good at that, to do that smoothly, to be aware of the tissue that you're going through, and to feel where you're supposed to stop and give the right amount of stimulation, that takes some time. And I had a pretty hardcore mentor in that, where there was like, you just keep working until you get it right, and if you don't get it right, you just keep practicing. But he was like that with martial arts. He was very rigid with himself,
Hmm.
very flexible with everyone else. He was like a second father to me. But I was terrified of him. Um, but
I'm honestly just thinking like Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid.
yeah, well, so he was honestly, he was British, of all
Oh,
things. He was this tiny northern Englander from a mining town who, through possibly some illegal activity, decided to leave England. Uh, um, but spent, I think a dozen years in China learning acupuncture, and then he went to Japan and spent 10 years there. And he had licenses in, I think, about 5 different countries. So when he came in and he started bringing in Japanese experts and Chinese experts and some of his friends from around the world, the idea was you have to have this basic skill to even get and understand these techniques. So when I hear it's painful, like I had somebody come in yesterday. It was her first time getting treated by me, but she'd had acupuncture before. And I had about 10 needles in her, and I have an MD that was observing me that day. So I have a witness to this. I'm not making this up.
I believe you.
Um, but she goes, "When are we going to get started?" I'm like, you you got like eight needles in you already." And she goes, "What? No, you just press the points." I go, "Yeah, yeah." I pressed them and then I put the needle in, and she goes, "I didn't feel any of them." Right. And the idea is, and comes from our classics, right? They say when the needle goes in, it scatters the energy a little bit, right? So especially if we want to build something up, we don't want to scatter it too much. You do techniques to kind of like draw the energy there. But she was just like, "What do you mean? I didn't feel it." Right. um the other idea is, so I said it shouldn't hurt at all. Some Chinese systems, they have this concept called de qi, which is like grabbing the energy. It's like it feels achy. But that's a relatively modern day concept that came in the 50s, and it happened with the Cultural Revolution in China, right? So they needed to get a lot of acupuncturists out. They needed healthcare workers. When communism took over, they didn't have the hospitals and the schools, so they gave everybody kind of these crash courses. But they didn't have the traditional training where they could insert these relatively thick needles into the body without pain. Um, you know, After World War II, China and Japan, they still don't like each other from that. But Japan had all the classical Chinese textbooks, and all of them would say things like, the patient shouldn't feel the sensation. The arrival of qi should be felt by the practitioner. Right. So the idea was we're going to refine the needles, make them smaller, make them smoother. You make them better so we can put these in with less discomfort. And in Japan, where in China, if you get this needle sensation, if you get that de qi, oh, it's a good strong treatment, right? And if you can't take it, especially they'll be, I had some teachers that are like, oh, they're white, don't do strong stimulation on them, which was funny because the treatment still worked, right? It wasn't the fact that it was the technique being too aggressive. It was like you Americans can't take this, you know. Um, but in Japan, if the patient goes ow, you're like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I messed up. I should have been more sensitive. I should have used better technique. And that's a cultural thing too, where the Japanese will always apologize. But within that, the more skill I've seen Chinese practitioners use some some pretty big size needles and put them in without the patient even noticing. And on the same token, I've seen some Japanese practitioners, not necessarily Japanese in ethnicity, use some really small needles and make patients say "ow." So it's a refinement of technique that I think a lot of practitioners don't get in their programs. Like it just didn't translate into the curriculum,
Mhm.
and then they don't explore it on their own. So if you get any hate mail, you can just pass it my way. If there's an acupuncturist that said he called my technique crap, yeah, send him my way.
I
Hey, thanks again for tuning into the Athlete's Health podcast. Your support really does mean a lot. We are passionate about bringing the mental health and performance topics to the forefront because, let's be real, the mental health crisis is a huge issue in society. Now, if you're enjoying the show, it would mean the world to us if you could just give it a 5-star review and share it with anyone who might benefit this message. Every bit helps in spreading the word and creating a stronger, healthier community. This podcast is just a small part of what we are doing at the Athlete's Health. We work directly with teams, coaches, and individual athletes even to help them unlock their full mental performance and ultimately overall performance. Now, whether that's getting the competitive edge, breaking through mental blocks, or just leveling up in the mental gym, we're trying to cover it all with people. So thank you for listening and supporting our mission. Now let's get right back to the show.
have faith in you. And the last thing with the acupuncture stuff,
Yeah,
within of what you're saying that I was really wondering is, and this we'll keep this short because I know there's a lot more that go
yeah,
into
you're
it than
you're
this.
fine, man.
But how do you know where exactly to put the needles? Because it just seems like people always think, oh, it's the knot, put it in the knot, and
I
I'm
you
just
know
assuming there's much more to
There,
it
there,
than.
there is, right, and a lot of it comes down to our intake, right? So we're asking questions, we're palpating all over the body. Some styles actually they'll smell the patient. I know that sounds crazy. They'll look at color under the eyes. We look at the tongue. We do abdominal diagnosis where we have just the tongue and the abdomen. We map out different areas of the body, different functions of the body. And if we see different colors, different texture on the tongue, if we feel something in those areas on the abdomen, it kind of leads us down one road. We have 12 channels on the body, and each one of those are associated with seasons, colors, the tissue that it runs through, emotional components, intellectual components, and that kind of gets us to like, oh, this is what we think is going on with the patient. Now let's go check those spots. Now, if we're doing something musculoskeletal, in the same way that like you would call it a trigger point in Western medicine, yeah, we'll use those acupuncture points like that. We use the word ashi, which means ouch, that's it in Chinese. It is considered very low class and to do what I call point and shoot acupuncture. Oh, look, there's a knot. Let's just get that. We have expressions like don't spank a crying baby. So if this area is hurting, what can we do down the channels away from that area before we run in there and treat that area? And some systems won't ever go to that area. They'll use ear, they'll use distal points, and then they might have the patient move that area to see if there's pain relief. But there's thousands of ways to do it. So it's hard to say how we choose the points without knowing what style and system someone is using to get there. Um, but the idea is that those channels that you see on that chart when you go to the acupuncturist and you see those 12 lines up and down the front and the back of the
Yeah.
body, those are like the interstate highways. What that chart doesn't show are the deeper connections to the organs, all these branches that come off that become like, oh, this takes you to this town and here's these dirt roads. Those are things that you kind of get as you build your clinical skill. Like, oh, I know, the textbook says this one connects here, here, and here, and then you keep doing it. You go, yeah, it does do that. So there's these subtle nuances that are past that. Well, here's the picture on the wall.
Mhm.
It's hard to say how people get there unless I know like the system they're using, and hopefully I know something about their system, because there's plenty of systems I don't know. You can't learn it all in this field.
All right, that's perfect. That was just one thing that I wanted to hear. And I know
Yeah,
some
yeah.
people would be like, "Oh, that's all like all the subsidies of like, oh, you look at this, you look at that." They'd be like, "I don't believe it." But then I just always like the caveat, be like, I mean, go test it out and see how
Yeah.
you feel
Yeah.
afterwards. It's kind of how I say on all this stuff. Like, don't
It's
knock it before you
also,
try it.
I would say, before we called it the scientific method, it was like, what are we doing? We're observing. And
Hmm.
the data that the system evolved over time, right? There wasn't always 12 channels. So it was thousands of patients over, probably millions of patients over thousands of years, where people were writing down like, look, this patient said this is what we did. They got better. They didn't. Okay, well, all right. I read this guy's stuff. He seemed to have some success with this. And then after you had this critical mass, it's like, no, that goes into one of the main books. And this is how we formulated this system. So it evolved over time in a very scientific way of observation and report. So it's always funny that, when it came over here, it got lumped into this kind of new agey thing. And it was like, no,
It's been around.
no, no one in Asia refers to it like that. And it's not alternative medicine. It's like, no, it's medicine. It works. It's part of the system. But if you
It's
got to call it Asian medicine or Chinese medicine or whatever to kind of differentiate it, no one cares.
in the Western culture, it is the alternative
It
medicine because
is.
it's not the Western medicine and all the pills and everything else. But to a different point.
Which are only, they'll refer to that as traditional medicine. And you're like, that might be 150 years old, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how old Merck is, but it's not, 3,000 years old. It's, maybe 150 years.
So exactly. This is gonna be this because that's already 30 minutes just on the acupuncture stuff.
That's fine, man. That's fine.
No, it's
I'll
awesome. This is
answer
why
anything.
I love it. And I want to get into the cupping stuff because I want to just
Yeah.
a quick little story about this or not. Because I was asking one of my friends who's in physical therapy stuff, and we were just talking. I'm really trying to build up like next generation too of people who can help and support and everything.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, I mean, we haven't really been taught too much on it, but all the places I've been practicing at, they all have it and we use it and everyone likes it. It makes sense." And I'm like, exactly. And I'm just thinking back to, because I used it a lot when I was in college,
Yeah.
my cupping set with my roommates, we'd all like it. Even just after like lifting and we'd be a little sore, we would use it. But I'm just thinking like, and after reading the book and connecting this to the holistic approach you're saying of people coming in or they're stressed out mentally or even just like mentally, emotionally, or even physically, like they have a
Yeah.
lot, they're feeling that tension, the cupping. It's probably just best if you explain this. How do you see this relieve that tension?
So this is the great thing. We talked about a little bit about autonomic nervous system, right?
Yeah.
Um, the weird thing about the autonomic nervous system is if you start doing a signal of the rest and digest, the parasympathetic nervous system, your body goes, "Oh, I'm doing that relaxed function, so I must be relaxed." So this is why breath work works, right? Oh, I extend my exhale. Oh, well, that's a sign of being relaxed. And then slowly we calm ourselves down. Even with the box breathing, right? 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. Wow, we've slowed our breathing down. Well, our breathing rate goes up when we're stressed, so we must be calm. So then magically we start feeling calm. So when we put the cups on, what we're doing is we're physically altering blood flow, right? So the cup goes on via creating a vacuum, and it pulls the skin up into the cup, which separates the skin from the fascia and then the fascia from the muscle. And because it's a closed system, more blood gets pulled through there. We've moved blood, right? And it's shown in studies that we can affect tissue 6 inches deep into the body. But now I'm having this huge effect on the inside of the body, getting more blood flowing through there, right? And on the superficial, we see that hickey, right? Those capillaries break, and we get those circles. But all the magic is happening behind that. And as we see that increase in circulation, the muscles tend to relax, right? Oh, we relaxed something. Now our parasympathetic nervous system goes, oh, we must be relaxed. So even when I put them on in clinic, and I just talking about how sensitive and mild my acupuncture technique is, I do a very Chinese cupping technique where some people go,
Yeah.
oh, you gotta back that one off. That's a little too much. But if not that I want people to fight through that, I want it to be moderately strong for them. But within that, after a couple of minutes, the fascia relaxes, the skin relaxes. Well, they're
Hmm.
comfortable and they get kind of sleepy. I had somebody who told me she fell asleep. She read my book. She had some cups. She fell asleep with the cups on. Don't do that. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
she woke up 9 hours later with the cup still on, and that's that over treatment. We helped her out, but that 15 minutes seems to be a really safe window with the home cupping sets. And if you're sensitive, even shorter than that. But you'll be surprised at how many people find it super relaxing. So that kind of deals with that kind of like shoulder tightness, but this is a little bit more horseshoes and hand grenades as well, where if you are working with musculoskeletal stuff, you go, well, what's hurting me? Let's put some cups in those areas. So there isn't like really a prescribed, like where acupuncture, we want this point because it's specifically said to do this. And we know even from modern studies, we put the needle in and the brain in that area lights up that corresponds to that issue. Here, it's like, no, we're getting a systemic effect in that area, right? So it's like, oh, we put the cup on the shoulder blade, but it's affecting the whole shoulder.
That was one
Um,
thing I was going to ask you. Do
yeah,
you need to know like all the little anatomical features, like that's my
no,
rhomboid, that's sore, or it's just the area and it
No,
can help
no.
out?
Yeah, and look, this is one where if you can find that trigger point, if you can find that thing that puts a tear in your eye when you touch it, yeah, you can cup over that. Um if you look at the body as a whole thing, right? Oh, my low back hurts. Well, I can go across the hips, I can go up a little, I can go down a little wherever it feels tight, and that's safe. That's the level of knowledge you need, right? I don't need to know that, oh, this is the head, the lateral head of the gastrocnemius, you know
Yeah,
near
exactly.
the tuberosity of the, yeah, no, don't worry about any of that. um it feels like it should go there. That's probably how grandma would have taught you to do it.
Because it just ties back to what you said of just the centuries of it just being used at
Yeah,
home.
yeah, and we know it was being practiced before this, but ancient Egypt was the first writing that we've recovered from it, and that was 1515 BC. So quite a long time ago. And even though the tools have changed, right? In my clinic, we do fire cupping with glass cups, and traditionally they were using like water buffalo horn and pieces of bamboo and clay pots. Now silicone cups with like a one-way pump on the top. We cover all that in the book. You
Hmm.
like, what's your budget? What are you looking for? I give you the pros and cons of all of them. They're all pretty good. They're all pretty cheap. For me, when I was writing the book, I think I spent $300, and I've been giving cups away now. It's like I don't need 5 of these sets, but they work really well, so you have all these options, and it doesn't have to be this scholastic endeavor. It can be like, well, this feels like where I need it, and as long as you don't put them on too strong or too long, you're going to be safe.
And you're right. In that book, and I'm not trying to sell your book or anything, but
No, no, it's
but
okay.
yeah, I'm just thinking back to like how I did it, and I was just experimenting when I first got the thing,
Yeah,
and I mean, I'd researched like YouTube video if it was my research. But you do lay it out like all the different kinds, and I
yeah.
didn't even know half these kinds of the cups because I just have the pump one.
That's
Now,
probably happened in the last 10 years.
mhm,
I bought so many sets that were like electronic, right? Where it has a motor to cause the suction. And I was like, this wasn't an option at all when I was in school 20 something years ago, almost
mhm,
30 now. Jesus, but now like this, even the silicone cups, right? They're everywhere and they're great. Why? Because I can throw them in my gym bag, and I don't need anything other than that. And boom, just stick it right on and you're good to go. So it's gotten infinitely easier and safer, and with each of that it's more accessible. Like I remember having my 5-year-olds putting cups on my back when they were young.
So, okay, let me ask you this two-parter question
Yeah.
because these are honestly questions I've had, so it's great to talk to you about it. One thing that I always found an issue, and I loved the section where you had all the different oils and not
Hmm.
lotions, but the different ways that you can have the cup stick more. Because for me, it's always been a challenge to cut my legs because my
Yeah.
legs are hairy and the
Yeah.
cups wouldn't stay very well. So one question is maybe explaining that a little bit, how that works. And 'cause, I mean, it's one, obviously you can understand how it works, but just a little more in depth of it. And the second thing that I was thinking about here is I know a lot of the gym bros or anything, they're like, oh, I'm so sore and this one's going to come out super dark. If you could
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
explain kind of those two mechanisms just a
Yeah.
little bit here.
Yeah. So first of all, the oil, liniment, anything that's going to kind of put a coating on the surface of the skin will help act. Because what ends up happening is your body hair will kind of get under the lip of the cup, and that's an area where that suction is not as strong, right? So you can have like a slow leak of air back into the cup, which will eventually cause the cup to come off. If we put oil down, because oil is just like these smaller molecules, it kind of helps to create like a little bit of like a buffer of that air leaking back in. So it's still going to leak off, but in areas that are hairier, I mean, you could theoretically shave the area. That seems a little extreme, but throwing some oil down just to add a coating, to close up some of the pores, to close up some of the gaps around the hair where that cup is coming in contact with it, will help create a better suction. Now, I also talk about sliding techniques in the book,
Yes.
and you
Talk about it.
need the oil, or you need some kind of lubricant to be able to slide that across the surface of the skin. That tends to be a little bit more aggressive technique. Some people don't like that so much because now it's like a manual therapy where like the cup is pushing down and then it's sucking up and then it's pushing back down. But you need some kind of lubricant to be able to move the cup. But it's a mechanical way of like helping seal that cup better.
When you do the sliding
Yeah.
therapy, this is just quick thought of, is it better to slide like towards the heart, so like with the lymph,
It, you,
or does
you
it not
know,
matter too
it
much?
it's really like sliding in certain areas. So like dry brushing, right? They talk about going towards the heart, right? I don't think I would be cupping and sliding the inside of my arm. right? Cupping
Yeah.
and sliding cupping tend to lend that the cupping in general, but like specifically sliding cupping lends itself to bigger, broader muscles. So you can do it across the chest, across the pec here. You can do it definitely up and down the erectors along the spine. You can do it across the low back. You can do it down the thighs. The adductors, the inside of the thighs, are horrible.
Yeah.
But up and down the calf too. So normally when I'm sliding, it's not a bad theory, but I'm not thinking about, oh, this is going to the heart. I'll normally go back and forth up and down the muscle.
Oh yeah. Cool. Thank you. That's what I was just wondering
I
that
know
as we were
it's
talking
not
about
a
it.
bad theory at all, because you are going to move some lymph with that. But for me, it's more about like getting that fascia, like hopefully some adhesions out of the fascia, more blood to the muscle tissue below it, and maybe even breaking up some of those knots in the muscle too.
All right, perfect. Because I'm just thinking because like that was the like legs and hips would always be so tight for me,
Yeah.
and and psychologically too, knowing that like, and then knowing either I can't do my workout as well, or just
No.
knowing
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm carrying this tension with me. If I can
And
release it, I feel better, and I see this with the athletes too that I talk to. So
I would almost say for me, because I got kind of like I'm not sure how I messed up the hip. But I would rather put a ton of cups on the hip uh rather than doing a bunch of sliding. Sliding is very quick. You don't need to make too many passes. But yeah, whew, it is one of the most intense sensations. As far as the color of the cup, I address this in the book too, because
hmm
you'll go on social media and you'll see other practitioners, regardless of their discipline, that do cupping. That'll say, "Oh, if it's red, it means there's blood stagnation. If it's dark red, it means, oh, the stagnation and heat. It's real bad." And there's nothing wrong with that, but like in Chinese medicine and East Asian medicine, you don't hang a diagnosis on one sign, right? So Michael Phelps gets out of the pool, they throw cups on him, right? The trainer's like right there, boom, 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 boom. We're gonna throw. Of course, those are gonna be darker. Why? He literally has blood like
yeah,
pumping through his body right now. It's just he just broke a record. Damn it! Like his his cardiovascular system is working overtime. Yeah, he's gonna recover quicker. His VO2 is probably so much better than mine, but it doesn't mean that he has stagnation. It just means that you broke some capillaries and he's got a lot of blood pumping through there. So it's not just because it's dark, it's a better treatment, or it's not because it's dark that it means necessarily something. You can get a really good effect without the patient actually getting bruised, because maybe they're those capillaries at the surface are very healthy, so they're not breaking so easily. It's really about creating that gap and getting more circulation deeper. So yes, the cupping marks do mean something, but I would like, when I see those charts, I'm like, oh God, if it's yellow, this, if it's, if you got blisters, it means this. And it's like, well, blisters could also mean you screwed up. Like too long, too strong, something like that. But yes, it could be dampness. This concept of dampness in Chinese medicine. But when you see the chart, unless you have a degree in Chinese medicine, dampness doesn't mean a goddamn thing. And I'll tell you
right.
this, for a lot of practitioners, it probably doesn't mean too much either. And yeah, send your hate mail to me. Uh,
No, that's just good to hear because I just know from the past and just talking to some of my friends even, but
yeah,
then also just athletes, and they're like, before the cup even goes on, they're like, "Oh, I know this one's gonna be so dark.
yeah.
I'm so sore," and I just wanted to get your viewpoint from all this.
Yeah, no,
So
no, no. And then some people are like, oh, you didn't make marks. It didn't work. Do you feel better? Yes. What the hell does it matter? And certain areas, right? Like, we do a lot of cupping on the low back and around the hips.
hmm
And if it's near larger vessels, yeah, sometimes we get darker bruises. We're not breaking those larger vessels. It's just there's better supply of blood there. But like if somebody is thicker in the hips and the lower back, sometimes you're not getting much because adipose tissue, because there aren't as many capillaries in that area. And it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just doesn't look textbook, photograph worthy bruising. But it should still help.
So it's the layers. You're looking at the layers here is what we want.
Yeah, exactly. There's
Tissue
so
layers.
many variables that if you feel better, it doesn't matter what it looks like.
Perfect. Feel better. I mean, that's a great philosophy to have too within it. Is just make you feel better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll have like a few more questions for you, but
Sure, man.
this last thing. So another story for you is some people I know who would do the cupping things. And I wanted your viewpoint for like at home if other people were to do this to feel better.
Mhm.
And they do cupping on one side because they're doing it themselves.
Yeah.
But then they're moving that arm, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, that's hurting." I mean, I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, dude!" But can you just kind of walk through that a little bit,
Yeah,
explain
yeah.
that? Because as
So
people are doing at-home remedies, they might find themselves in a situation.
and that's one of the things where, like, I think I do mention it a couple of times in the book, like, you might need a partner for some of this. So you'll
Yeah, you
see
do. You mentioned that.
you'll see these kind of myofascial release techniques where they'll put the cups on and they'll have somebody move through a range of motion. That's not traditional, but I don't think it's bad. And that seems to fall a lot with athletic trainers and PTs. A lot of acupuncturists are doing it a little bit more classically. And it's not to say that they won't have patients move, but because we've increased, like, basically when you put that cup on the skin, you don't have as much tissue to work with because it's stuck up in the cup. So you'll like every little range of motion, like you might have had some adhesions, something that's like limiting the motion. Well, now we've temporarily made that even tighter, right? So people will move,
Mhm.
they'll go, "Oh yeah, that really hurts," or "Oh, I can't do that." And it doesn't mean you've done damage. It's just you're working with less tissue to actually be able to move. So it's interesting because a lot of times what I was trained to do with fire cupping in the clinic is put them on. If you want the patient to then do some range of motion exercises, you take them off, you have them move them, and then you can say, all right, where else are you feeling it, and then maybe attach the cups in those areas. So you're
Hmm.
trying to kind of like, all right, we got this to release, but you still have some tension here. And that's a way to kind of mediate the, like, oh, I moved and it's too tight, is use less cups and just do a couple of stages of cupping. But it's not bad. I don't think people are injuring themselves as long as, with the pump gun, if you got one that's in Korean or Chinese and you can't read those, somewhere on there it says don't pump more than 3 or 5 times. And I'm not trying to throw my dad under the bus here, but I got him like a cupping set, and it was a nice Korean one with the pump. And I'll do cupping on him when I see him, or I'll treat him with acupuncture. But he goes, "I need you to look at something when you come back." And he had blood blisters on one cup that he had on his low back. And I said, "Dad, what happened? Did you fall asleep with it on?" And he goes, no, it was really hurting. Like, my back was really hurting. So your mom put the cup on me, and I said, just keep pumping it. And I was like, oh, no. There's a limit there, right? I told you 3, knowing that, well, 3 felt good. Let's do 4. Like, I was hoping
Yeah.
that he would still stay within that safe zone, but he hasn't done that since, and that was probably 20 years ago. So I think we're all right. He learned his lesson. But I don't want that to happen to people. I don't want them to overtreat, right? If you're not sure how your body's going to react, or you're using a silicone cup that you can't see in, I would rather have you take it off, go, okay, it wasn't that strong, and then put it back on than hurt yourself, because once you get those blood blisters, you're not cupping that until that area heals.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking too. Like, stay safe if you're trying this out. I mean,
Yeah.
do less and more to start out at least. Get the feel for it. I mean,
Yeah, it's like adding salt to soup. You can always add more. It's a pain in the ass to get out. You know?
that's a good analogy. As I like that, Dr. Tom. So I usually like to wrap these up with like one or two final messages. Like if you had a take home or anything of the sorts,
Yeah.
Dr. Tom, what would that be for
Yeah.
you, especially in this?
So I would say, because of the topic has really been like a bunch of traditional therapies. I would say, look at these traditional therapies a little bit more open-minded. A lot of them are getting this resurgence because now we're backing them up with actual studies and actually something scientific. And it that doesn't change whether or not they work throughout history. It just means our understanding them has evolved a little bit. I always talk about meditation because it's like the cheap, free thing that you can do that will have impact on every aspect of your life, even pain management. So, yes, all of these things are traditional, all of these things are low cost, but when employed properly, will be infinitely valuable to people's lives.
I was gonna say that wraps it up pretty good because we were just saying it's been around for so long
Hmm.
and it's been useful for so long, but now in the Western side, the Western culture, it is just now being put into all the scientific data, the scientific research and stuff. It
Yeah.
and hopefully that keeps happening. Is honestly,
I think it will as people are exploring how to stay healthy and how to have a bigger presence in their own healthcare. Um, even now, I said I had an MD in my office the other day. She doesn't do acupuncture, but wanted to see what it was all about firsthand. She caught one of my lectures and said, "Yeah, can I come observe you?" And yeah, sure. And hopefully that'll lead to some kind of research project later down the road.
yeah,
But for now, the idea was let's share this message because even Western physicians know that, like, look, we're missing a lot of stuff because this is the system we're in. If they're aware of the faults and shortcomings of it, so it's not a surprise to anybody, right? Oh, if they don't have insurance, they're not getting health care. Oh God, this service costs $30,000 and insurance isn't going to cover it. Or, we can't find anything wrong, so we can't write the thing on the bill, so we can't bill insurance. So get them out of here. Rather than here's what we can do to take care of people. And traditional medicine doesn't, they're not going to go, oh, this is all in your head. Get out of here. They're going to look at you as a whole person and say, okay, maybe it is a mental issue, but how do we treat that? You know, and I think that is something that humans need, right? We need all of those aspects of ourselves to be balanced and looked at and appreciated so we can be better functioning humans.
that just makes me just think about this as we do wrap it up. But because in my curriculum, when I was finishing school, I was in this diet and exercise program, so it was
Yeah.
just all like dietetics and exercise science. But I was doing so much like health coaching and personal training and stuff as a job, and but I would just always realize the people, like, if it's not a documented health problem or
Hmm.
anything, they don't really want the change. They don't want that health change. But I say this because it's kind of reflects of what you're just saying of it might not be boxed in this one category, but if overall we can make these changes, hit them upstream, then all in all, that health, the holistic approach can really
Yeah.
help out.
Absolutely. And that, these kind of medicines, they really excel in, like, let's work on this before it becomes that cancer or that becomes this major issue that now you need surgery for. And I think, that's the same thing with exercise and diet and all those things, right? Invest before it becomes a problem. The solution is infinitely cheaper, it's infinitely easier. And then when you're 70, 80, you're not dealing with the same issues as every other 70 or 80 year.
Hmm. All right, Dr. Tom, you think we missed anything?
No, man, this was a great conversation. I think we got to a lot.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. Let me close this up here fast, and then we'll
Sure.
get going. But the Athletes Health Podcast, just trying to talk to great leaders, people making these innovative moves like Dr. Tom to help people overall in that health holistic thing. Like my mental performance coaching, trying to get it out there more. But I say this, the cup and stuff, maybe test it out, try it out on your own. Check out the book if you want like a how to. Like if I wasn't going through the academia I did, I probably would have definitely wanted this book. I still would have wanted this book. But that's honestly all. When I get to Maryland sometime or Baltimore, Dr. Tom, I'm gonna have to make an appointment
Yeah, man.
100%.
Get you in.
But that's about all I have. So thank you, sir.
Oh, no problem. This was great.
Cool.